Hello, guys. We are back for space regarding yet another excerpt of Trofimov's book regarding Ukraine. The book is atrocious. The articles he has peddled are even worse. Uh, but the most important part right now is to be factual about the second article. The second article, basically, it's a Washington Post, a WAPO piece, who basically surmises that the best chance to defeat the Russians was at the heels of the successful operations both in Kharkov and in Kherson. So that's, if you have followed my spaces, you know that there were two things to be done for the Ukrainians. They should have the equipment, the arsenal, the weapons to follow up on those two. However, so the two operations, Kherson and Kharkov, however, the Ukrainians never had it and couldn't have had it by that time because the logistical drain uh, due to both the ongoing war, the pushes in Lugansk, the pushes in Donetsk, the stubborn defense in Kherson, and generally the overall topographical vision of the eastern Kharkov Oblast made it almost impossible for them to concentrate any kind of troops at the right spaces. I will start with the obvious. Trofimov here is trying to shape the narrative. It's the new blame game who tries to find a cathartic, safe passage towards non-burdening the Ukrainians with the failure and the failure that is related to the options that they took. The Ukrainians in 2022 did a formidable job by exploiting weak points, loose ends of the Russian strategy for Ukraine. They, I would say, took out the two low-hanging fruits. The Kharkov area was maybe a less, I'd say, obvious point than the Kherson area. The Kherson area was obvious for one main reason: the Dnieper cuts the oblast in two. So at some point, the attack on the supply lines across the Dnieper, straight to Kherson, was problematic. As I already said, there were 4 bridges, 2 rail bridges, 2 road bridges. One road bridge would go through the Novakakova Dam. The other road bridge would be the Antonovsky Bridge. You already know that. Then you got the Antonovsky Rail Bridge, and you got another Zalizny road bridge, a rail bridge actually, that goes through the river. So basically, Kherson, as I already said multiple times, the moment was in a sense failed. The moment the encirclement of Nikolaev failed, Kherson was a matter of time, unless there was progress everywhere else, so it could help the Russians shift their attention towards pushing towards Kryvyi Rog and then Kherson. That never happened for one main reason, and that main reason is that the Ukrainians got what they asked from the Americans, despite what Trofimov says. I will go into detail to explain to you why what Trofimov says, that basically the Ukrainians never had the weapons they required, the Ukrainians never had the supplies they required, and the Ukrainians never were trusted with being able to use those weapons. Now, in order to understand the problem with both Kherson and Kharkov, we need to fast forward our situation. We are roughly around the month of June. The Russians have basically pulled back from Chernigov, pulled back from Sumy, pulled back from Kiev, concentrated since mid-April around the Donbass area. There were nice battles for Kremenaya, very fast. They moved pretty hard, and they were around the month of May in front of the Donets. Then the first fiasco happens. The troops, the concentration of troops trying to cross over the Donets is spotted for at least 2 to 3 days. The Ukrainians have massed whatever rocket artillery and whatever Lotto Bingo that I have already received and pointed them directly towards the two passages, one in Bilogorivka, the other on the Dvorichne Dibrova. 3 crossing points are targeted. The first crossing actually succeeds. They pass through. The problem is that they are not in a large enough space to be able to do anything. 3 Ukrainian tanks are destroyed. A couple of other vehicles are also destroyed by returning fire, but it's too late. The area is completely bracketed, and about a BTG or 80% of a BTG in vehicles, and about roughly 15% of a BTG worth of killed in action is had in about 3 days. So basically there is a whole BTG that's lost, there is pontooning equipment that's lost, and there is no flank to be able to force the Ukrainians deeper into Lugansk and Donetsk Oblast. Therefore, all the attacks are going to be rather funneled from Popasna towards Severodonetsk and then Lysychansk. This situation, unfortunately, makes the difference between the Russians being able to secure another salient within Ukrainian-held Donetsk, and it also coincides, so the failed crossing coincides with a ongoing operation in Kharkov Oblast. The down trade between pulling back from Chernigov, pulling back from Sumy, pulling back from Kiev is that the Ukrainians themselves, given that no critical infrastructure has been crippled, can then pass troops from the west of the country through completely untouched bridges over Kiev. They can use the rail track despite multiple attacks on substations and some crossings. The Russians simply stopped doing that because it's not important anymore. They do not have the possibility to follow up. It's exactly what the Ukrainians had as an issue, trying to bomb bridges between Crimea and Kherson this summer. If there is no follow-up, the guys are simply going to fucking repair it. You are too far to be able to do anything. This was the biggest difference between Kherson beyond the Dnieper and the situation with the Kharkov transfer of troops. So basically, while the Russians were transferring troops mostly towards the Donetsk and Lugansk oblasts and a small reinforcement on the Zaporizhia front, the Ukrainians were following them up by putting troops within range of Kharkov and allowing them to start to accomplish small baby steps towards the complete debacle that we will see in September. 3 points are very important. In end of April, there is a approval for Western artillery, so a bunch of Lotto Bingos, M777s, and now we know that the training in Germany with these weapons had started end of March. So this, first of all, belies what Trofimov said in the first article, that basically The Ukrainians were mostly spurred by what happened in Bucha and by the quote-unquote successes on the battlefield. So they basically decided not to go on with the negotiation in Istanbul, first Antalya, then Istanbul. This, of course, is wrong, and I already had space over this. But the second part now, the lies over something that is publicly known now, is that the logistical chain, in order to deliver the artillery rounds and the artillery systems, would have put them in roughly end of February approval, roughly 20th of March, 19th of March in Germany, systems are ready. You bring Ukrainians for a course for the HIMARS. It was apparently 3 weeks, according to US officials. I probably think that for the Lotto Bingos was just the same. If you put your, I'd say, deadline at the 30th of March 2022, you add 3 weeks, you are at the mid of April, so you start having your first artillery systems by the end of April, and we saw that very early in May. A whole battery was spotted and almost taken out, first by a Kub drone and then by a Smerch or Uragan cluster ammunition. So these are things that we have on tape. It's not something that Trofimov can suddenly pretend never happened. This is just how it was. You cannot start having any kind of discussion here. It's on tape. It's literally hard copy. However, in the meanwhile, because this is the best part of it, in the meanwhile, in May, around the 20th of May 2022, the Ukrainians started an attempt to attack Zaporozhye. It ended in absolute failure. It was the first major victory from the Russian on the defensive point. Over 30 vehicles were destroyed, at least 10 tanks, couple of BTRs, couple of BMPs. It was for a while, given that we hadn't seen these scenes except for the highway of death in Oleshki. For a while, everybody was trying to see if these weren't Ukrainian images that the Russians were using, but the sense, the attacks, and whatever was used to take them out proved that it was the first major attempt on the follow-up of the Kherson counteroffensive that started, as you know, if you followed the last space, in the mid-March, with a very strong attack against Kherson's international airport and rather large destruction of assets on the Russian side, helicopters and trucks, along with some APCs. So all this part here shows clearly that whatever is being said by the Ukrainians, by Trofimov, because he's actually using Ukrainian sources for a while, they do not correspond to reality. So first of all, the logistical burden, the logistical chain, including with approval, would have been at least for 2 months. And we know that officially we have deliveries in May for the M777s. That means that if you add 2 months as a minimum, you are in March. Early May, early March, that means that since the beginning, the Americans had the idea that the Ukrainian defense was successful because the Russians, first of all, had almost no secrets for them when it came to ISR, when it came to comms, when it came to whatever you want. But on the other part, the Russians weren't there with 500,000 people or even 400,000 people. About 150 to 190,000, according to whoever you fucking listen, were bunched up together in order to force a concession on the table. Now, a posteriori, it would be callous of me to say that it was a blessing for the Russians because a lot of people died, a lot of good material was destroyed, and Russia had to relearn a lot of basics on the go. But from what we're seeing right now, maybe that was for the best. because, as I told you, that's my hypothesis, my estimation. There were three levels of objectives for Putin or for the Russian leadership, let's say it like this. First of all, the maximalist one. Basically, you get inside, you affect a regime change. Meanwhile, you also take over a large part of the south, including Odessa. That means that whatever happens in the future, you are controlling the whole Black Sea coast on the Ukrainian side, and therefore Ukraine is basically a landlocked country, the perfect embodiment of a rump state. That thing doesn't work. There was a second level, as I said, that included also the conquest on the south, and this was the transactional objective. So if we cannot have Kiev, then we go into a bargain. That bargain is that we give you back Kharkov, we give you back Kryvyi Rog and Dnipro, and even Odessa, but we hold whatever we have beyond the Dnieper on its left bank or right bank, depending how you, if you want to look about the flow or you want to look about the geographical position. So basically, that was the transactional objective. We cannot win outright, but because we are forcing Ukraine in a situation where they are basically a rump state, they're going to sit with us, discuss with us, and accept something simple. We recognize Crimea. We may be going to recognize the land corridor. The Donbass is yours, guys. Please leave us be. And you have a intermediary result. This also failed, mostly, as I said, because the first maximal objective was based on capitulation. This didn't happen. Therefore, the second had also little chance because, as I said, and this comes, here comes the foreign aid. Aid was pouring. The borders were wide open. Two hubs were already located, one in Slovakia, the other in Poland, and a third one would open around May, June 2022 in Romania. So basically, even the transactional deal was impossible because transactional would mean that the other party cannot get what you're offering them by warfare. In this case, as I said, this whole preparation, the critical mass that the Americans and everybody was providing, literally was pointing towards a longer war. Longer war means no negotiations. No negotiations means that the only third level of objectives, so the bare bones strategic dogfight kind of objective was available, which is Donbass, land bridge to Crimea, and as much as possible off the coast. This, of course, is what we're having right now. And this is also why the Russians were so adamant and so ferocious into defending positions that they couldn't defend in Kherson. Of course, I explained that in Kherson, given the problematic situation with the supply and the retreat lines, was running on Russians' mind. And also a lot of other I'd say assets and capabilities weren't there at the same level. I mean, we can remind everybody that for 3 months, from May to roughly September, only a handful of Lancets were used. Maybe, I don't know, 60 or 70. I need to check for lost armor on that. And then when you compare to what happened during the counteroffensive Zaporozhye, each month was eons more, and we were about like 300 to 400 Lancets against a very limited front. So once again, you can understand that Crimean land bridge was a core objective. It was like the bottom line, and therefore, because the two first levels had failed, Putin put himself on the brink. Of course, this happened both by declaring a partial mobilization and also declaring those oblast parts of Russia, so basically an annexion. Now let's go back to Trofimov and what he says. Trofimov says that Zaluzhny apparently had asked for a lot of things, but the core demand were 90 extra howitzers. Now, the biggest problem with this is that if those 90 extra howitzers were so important, then how come that after the huge defeat in Zaporozhye for the Ukrainians, which once again would kill the whole front counteroffensive, uh, the first phase had failed in Kherson. They had pushed for about 20 kilometers. Then in 2 days they got pushed back 10 kilometers in retreat. From stabilizing Singurievka, Nikolaev was safe from invasion and control. That was a positive point for the Ukrainians. But the Russians could strike the city at will, and it created this very problematic situation for Nikolaev, which on top of the attack on the barracks, um, rendered the water almost insalubre, improper for consumption. There were bread queues, supply lines were very problematic in Nikolaev, and a lot of people were filling the morgues. So on that aspect, the Ukrainians literally, after failing the counteroffensive in Kherson because of lack of supplies, troops, and equipment, got their nose blooded in Zaporozhye, so that line got fixed for a while. But on the other side, the successes were there. The Russians apparently tried to transfer troops toward Kherson, which I do not believe. I really think that in Kharkov, the Russians had spent a lot of force for the grouping over there, both in the mistakes during the Donetsk and Oskil campaigns, but also it took them a while to go through Izium, Balakleya, and then the now infamous Sherwood Forest next between Kupiansk and Izium. This problem that we have with the depletion of forces up north was made also more problematic by the absolutely unfathomable situation of contractuals that after 6 months of war decided that it was enough, and about between 8 to 15,000 is now the consensus, simply did not follow through with a renewal contract, which deprived apparently all the fronts, but especially the northern one. On top of it, the rear lines on the northern front were manned by volunteers and by people from the republics, which created a complete mismatch in capability, which was then exploited by the Ukrainians. Um, However, as I said, both fronts, Kherson and Kharkov, were low-hanging fruits for the Ukrainians. And they were low-hanging fruits because of a lot of mistakes that the Russians did, but also because the weapons that now Trofimov says were too slow to come were already there. As I said, and I promised guys from the Timor criminal crew to have a word on it. Basically, um, with the introduction of longer range artillery, so the Lotobingos and the HIMARS, the Russians weren't expecting something that they had been doing, and actually they were hit even by Tochkas at some point. We have this scene when about 40 vehicles, including four or five tanks, were hit by a Tochka on a huge hangar, completely open and visible, that Ukrainians had apparently been looking on for weeks. And that hangar literally was hit and was burning. And this was one of those moments where the Russians should have learned their lesson, but they didn't. They didn't because they were on the offensive, they had the initiative, and therefore those quote unquote losses weren't as much problematic because the Ukrainians were on the back foot, so they couldn't exploit these hits. However, with the arrival of HIMARS and, of course, with the eye in the sky, in this case, the Western and especially American intelligence, Americans had had about 3 to 4 months to literally see the logistical trail of the Russians, both in the south in the center and in the north. The logistical trail, when it came from Valuki, and so basically from Belgorod towards Kharkov, was extremely open. The Russians had about 30 to 60 kilometers to transfer the troops, and they had installed from basically Chuguiv to Krastiliman small depots or bigger depots within 12 to 30 kilometers from each other. This allowed them to be extremely reactive in their offenses. So basically, you are going to lack ammunition, a truck is going to go through, drop into your local dump, go there and go forward. Another truck is going to replenish from a bigger dump that you have 30 kilometers away to the 12 kilometers. Everything was extremely visible. No much effort was made to conceal it. And most importantly, the Russians honestly weren't expecting that the combo would be as deadly within the range. One thing that was very important, that was said by Americans themselves, the Ukrainians, once they had that toy, let's say it like this, went on a spree. So basically, they would fire up to 6 to 7 charges out of the 18 disposable initially vehicles. And it led to a situation where, on first sight, the damage wasn't that big. The first recorded hit was against a known correspondent, Stash Eddy, old Eddy, and he actually said, "Thank God nothing happened. Okay, the cars are torched, but we had only 2 wounded." That was a lucky one, because from that moment on, the Russians would be extremely slow to react. Back then I said that there was a forced caravaning that was supposed to be happening, a reinforcement of the dumps. Unfortunately, a bit of a war criming that needed to happen. That they need to follow the example of the Ukrainian army, which was to put ammunition into civilian areas. That's unfortunately how the Ukrainians were working. So for the Russians, in my opinion, that was long overdue. This only happened in October and November 2022, when you see a lot of HIMARS strikes that are recorded from May, June towards September. Every single depot, every single spot that's hit is way beyond most urban areas. They mostly are industrial storages. So basically, they are easy targets to recognize and also to hit. On the other side, Trofimov says that this help never came, and it needed 90 howitzers if it couldn't have all the tanks, the Bradleys, the BMP, and so on. This, once again, is bullshit. Why? First of all, I explained why. Because what was delivered initially as artillery started to get attrited extremely fast. So 1 week after the Lotto Bingos were declared, a whole battery was spotted. I think that you all have the footage in mind right now, with the coup that first spots them, tries to hit the deploying battery. At least one guy is wounded or killed, but the hit is a rather large miss. Then the whole battery goes to a wooden area, and it is being hit by cluster ammo. We don't know how much they lost there. We don't know even if they lost anything. But the guns were spotted, and the guns were used literally as it was a parade. Neat lines. It was ironically very reminiscent to what the VDV had done in Nikolaev. They were putting neat line in order to form a barrage mode, and voila, ammunition completely exposed over the ground, which means that any hit over there was going to pepper both guns and troops and the trucks that brought the ammunition there. So overall, what happened here is that a miscalculation on the Russian part and a rather good calculation on the American part, that where I think 100% sure that the Russians would expect America to use the HIMARS with its power and the Ukrainians to be just trigger pullers. Um, this happened, and by the fact that the geographic distribution of the Kharkov area and the fact that the backfield of the Kharkov area was completely open, trains were rolling, uh, highways were not completely blockaded, destroyed, whatever. The damage in Kharkov was important, especially the tank prom, the track prom, the KZ, the engine and the tractor plant. But all the rest, Stary Saltov, Peshanivka, all the part towards the train station west of Kharkov, all that area was maybe hit once or twice. And most of the time, it was supposed to just make it impossible for them to repair the traffic fast enough. But the reality is that Ukrainians just didn't care. They would literally replace the rails because it was their lifeline initially, but then it was the whole point of it. By the end of May, Russian troops were completely beyond Chuguiv, and they were only holding about maybe 7% of the oblast, and then everything happened. The attrition was very high, 500s weren't there, so it was a perfect storm against the Russian defenders in um, the Lugansk Kharkov border area. What made everything worse is that Lapin, after fucking up the crossings over the Donets and being, I'd say, lackluster in his efforts to support the guys in Severodonetsk and Lysychansk in order to liberate Luganda, was still kept as area commander, and his reaction time was an absolute shit show. First of all, they lost control over the main key highway in Izium towards Kupiansk. Then the guys literally tried to defend themselves because afterwards we saw that despite what the Ukrainians said, they went fast, but they lost a shit ton of things. The lines literally dominoed. So basically, the first line took a hit, tried to react, but the communication was lost with the second line. Second line sees Ukrainians come, and they feel that everything is doomed. And then you have this collapse on the Kharkov front, which within 11 days is moved in depth of at least 70 kilometers. Actually, it was 49, but 70 kilometers overall. Let's be a bit more schizo on that part. So Kharkov was a long-hanging fruit because the operation to make it a low-hanging fruit had started since roughly the end of March, when basically the Russians had gone from Sumy, Chernigov, and Kiev. Basically, the Ukrainians had 100% of the potential to turn the heat up on the Kharkov grouping, and most of it is that the Russians, for some reason, absolutely went with this deranged option of going through Balakleya and cutting the so-called retreating Ukrainian army from Donbass. The retreat never happened. The only retreat that happened wasn't from Donetsk Oblast, it was from Lugansk. And we remember the Georgian-style scenes from the Ukrainian army, grabbing whatever Zhiguli, whatever Lada, whatever you want. They were just fucking loading themselves in and going away. And the state of their army back then on the Lugansk Oblast was an absolute shit show. The problem is that that army was there to sacrifice itself and cede as little terrain that they could afford to cede. This, of course, didn't go as planned because the Russians still took a lot of prisoners, still advanced pretty nicely. But what people called an operational pause was actually the second step, and I'm going to come to the second step. The moment in July, end of July, when the Russians have Lugansk and there is this operational pause that is supposed to actually lead towards an exploitation of Popasna towards Bahmut by Wagner and friends, the Kherson offensive happens. The Kherson offensive actually was an extreme shit show for both parts, but Ukrainians lost a lot of people, a lot of good men. And therefore, because of that offensive didn't go as expected for the Ukrainians, despite the fact that everyone now says, with regards to the counteroffensive Zaporozhye, that they were firing 10 times more in Kherson than now. And it's true. They had fresh new howitzers. They had at least 800,000 ammunition brought to them. Everybody was giving something on the artillery ammunition front. So generally speaking, Kherson was well stocked, and it was also the initially what was thought to be the main offensive direction actually happened to be the fixation point. And it was a fixation point because, as I said in a previous space, the Russians, the moment they lost their initiative around Nikolaev, they knew that Kherson was going to be a matter of time. And I said that probably around April, when they stopped the counter towards Kherson, plans were hatched to make sure that either the perimeter of northern Kherson was defended as well as possible before a eventual retreat, or they could have been a attempt to go towards Kryvyi Rog, which would have facilitated, once again, it would have facilitated the expanse towards the inner Ukraine, which then would have forced the Ukrainians to them change axis. Exactly what happened after the failed counter the previous year and the counter attack, quote unquote, around the axis of Bahmut and the axis of Avdiivka. This, unfortunately, both sides took it wrongly. On one side, the Russians thought that the main effort was going to be Kherson, completely forgetting that Kherson is a dead end. You have the Dnieper, so basically your main risk as Russians is to get your troops captured. There is nobody that is going to follow you through Kherson for one main reason. The Ukrainians had not committed to any kind of river crossing when they could do it. The only river crossing they were able to accomplish was over the Ingulets, but the depth there was so low that you could see even the trucks and the maps they were using to actually cross over the pebble crossing that they had made, or the pontoons that they had laid. You could see half of the car still in the water. The biggest problem is just the water was too high for most of the shit they were using, but it wasn't such a big problem. So Russians honestly took the wrong bait. I think they took the wrong bait because they still had some hope that the Ukrainians would be a lot more open in their efforts and a lot less, I'd say, proficient with the new artillery they had. But unfortunately for them, planning, at least for the HIMARS, wasn't done by the Ukrainians. And you could see the fact that the HIMARS strikes on the Antonovsky Bridge, Kakova Dam, and so on, were extremely accurate, and they were preceding most of the Russian movements. We have this unfortunate video when a guy is on an APC slash tank, and he is literally under the arrivals, is being covered. So yeah, there the Russians made a mistake, not that much because the Ukrainians were very smart. They made a mistake because they were fearing of losing a large amount of troops. Therefore, the whole logic was to keep the Ukrainians as far as possible from the crossing lines, and then the guys would need to find a solution in order to retreat. And the solution was the use of Lancets. The use of Lancets is extremely important because it's going to explain to you why the 90 howitzers required by Zaluzhny are an absolute nonsense. They are no panacea. In the private group, I made a small. I'm going to post the pictures, by the way. By November 2022, over 30 guaranteed Lotto bingos have been lost. That means that on the initial delivery, 1/5 of them has been lost. That's 20%. 90 more would have exposed more of them, therefore, would have just made a bigger dent on the 7/7 Lotto bingo. Most importantly, they were spotted from the beginning. From the beginning, whole arrays were spotted, batteries were spotted, something was there, someone was giving info. I think most of it was just, autists being autists and calculating the maximum range after being hit with the first artillery rounds from 155, and we saw one very early hitting Donetsk, and I showed that was a French artillery round actually. You would more or less see that if you have to do the double-double, so basically you need to be as far of the front line as you're hitting on your target divided by 2. So basically, if you're hitting at 24, you need to be at least 12 kilometers from the front line, because then you have 12 kilometers to your target behind the front line. So all this situation made that I think the Russians understood pretty well, and also given that the Ukrainians had a lot less assets to move them around, they were still going on with M1083s. It was rather easy to spot them. At some point, I don't know if you remember, after the first battery that was spotted going to the bushes, a whole battery was spotted leaving the first fire position on the crossroad, and at least 2 vehicles and 1 artillery gun was hit back there. So once again, with the use of Landsets, use of that long-range counter-battery fire that the Russians were apparently missing, the 90 howitzers, be that self-propelled or not, were simply not enough. On top of it, there was a huge chance on the Kharkov area where artillery was used half and half. A lot of HIMARS was used to soften the Russians, and artillery was literally used when they needed something more specific, because it was more complicated, there was defensive positions, or they weren't cutting through. Here, when we go and compare it to what is being said by Trofimov, that the weapons weren't coming, the threats by Russia were having a effect, I completely disagree, and I'm going to tell you why. In the best case scenario, if you pull your HIMARS from the US, drop them by plane to Poland or Germany, the shortest timeline from the decision, political decision, and transfer is going to be 7 days, a whole week. And we're speaking about transit and transfer by plane. We're not speaking about large quantities that the Americans started to do in May and June by boat, because they couldn't keep up with the plane usage. So, in order for the HIMARS to be ready when it was ready, both in Europe for the training and in the Ukraine for the usage, Americans say they need to train the Ukrainians for at least 3 weeks. This is, once again, on tape. At least 1 week of preparation to transfer them, that's 4 weeks. So at minimum, you have a whole month. I think that the real decision and the escalation ladder starts from February. The moment the Americans know how much the Russians have put there, they start to war game this shit. And on some aspects, they were wrong. On some aspects, they were right. On other aspects, they were dead right. Unfortunately for them, the Russians also reacted. A lot less to HIMARS, because with the HIMARS, they were actually gotten with the pants in their knees or in their heels, whatever, on their ankles, whatever. Logic was the Russians weren't prepared for the HIMARS to be that accurate because, once again, they weren't expecting, and this after fucking 3 months having issues with the Americans after the Moskva was sunk due to Western ISR. These guys weren't prepared for a HIMARS to use the full potential of the targeting and recon from the US. That is one of those things that I've said. The 2022 was a purge for a lot of us because it was literally reading doctrine on the Russian military, knowing what they could do, knowing what the theoretical capabilities were, and already not being that impressed with what they could theoretically do, but then seeing them fumble basics, mostly because they had to change plan on the course of action. This was a complete, I mean, like, for me, that's why I stopped that idea that would grow fast, and I went to, okay, this is going to be another attrition war, another salami tactic, and therefore I stopped worrying about the ongoing fuck up, and I said, okay, where are we going to start from this situation? We are almost rock bottom. Rock bottom was hit when the Crimean bridge was damaged. But that was the point. But let's go back to Trofimov. Trofimov said something very, very interesting. Said like something should have been done in the heels of both successful offensive. Well, that's another problem. First of all, as I said, in Kherson you are at the dead end. You need to cross the Dnieper, but you don't have the boats. You literally force the Russians to do what you are trying to do now, and they are literally eating shit in Krinky, in Cossack camps, in the Dacha area, Golaya Pristan. They are causing damage to the Russians for sure, but every time these guys come there, they get slaughtered, and they didn't have the capability to do that river crossing. They knew it, and that was one of the things that a lot of I'd say military commentators said maybe it was a defeat for Russia, but the retreat was, however it was, you can think it was shitty, you can think it was whatever, it worked. It saved Russia a large contingent of troops. They didn't leave that many equipment behind. If you compare it with the debacle in Kharkov, it was 1/3 of it. Most importantly, Surovikin had started the works on his lines by mid-October. And therefore, a lot of these things made sense for the Ukrainians. They knew they couldn't go behind it, but the PR victory on Kherson was great. However, that's what I'm saying. You go towards Kherson because you squeezed the Russians out, but now you need to squeeze in. That would have been an absolute murder. And the thing is, you tried in Zaporozhye. First in May, complete disaster, biggest debacle ever. Then another attempt end of September in order to actually facilitate a push both on Kherson, which was still contested because I think they had only a small patch of Kherson Oblast coming from Kryvyi Rog. On the other side, in Kharkov, they had advanced very fast from the 9th to the 20th, but after that, first videos of, oh shit, it's getting harder now, started to come. And yes, they advanced pretty far. They crossed the Kharkov-Lugansk battle line, but it was becoming so harder. And it was becoming harder because the Russians, they kept to their fucking plan. First of all, they kept Bakhmut, despite the fact that Wagner should have been sent either in Kherson or in Kharkov to buoy one of the two fronts. No, Wagner started a fucking job from Popasna towards Bahmut, and Putin called what? A partial mobilization. That partial mobilization stops Kharkov. It's not immediate. It takes time. It would take until January, 2023, when the Ukrainians will absolutely give up pushing forward. On Kherson, as I said, what happened by mid-November. The Ukrainians were stuck because of the river, and on Zaporozhye there simply was nobody to do anything because the offensive in Kharkov was still ongoing. The counteroffensive or the operation from the Russians with Wagner and some other units towards Bakhmut started, and for people who actually were reading back then, suddenly after this whole victory in Kharkov, because Kherson was still ongoing. Kherson is going to be decided roughly around mid-October, with the push towards not Berdiansk. Anyway, I'm gonna find it on the map. Push from Kryvyi Rog along the Dnieper River line. That would be stopped at Duchan. So that problem that we have there is that the Ukrainians were still busy with two counteroffensive. The liberation of quote-unquote Kharkov Oblast, which wasn't actually liberated, whatever, because there was still a peace in Russian hands, is only one part. That counteroffensive lasts until January with worse and worse and worse result. And in a sense, it already shows how any kind of counteroffensive on the Ukrainian side is going to be once they cannot maneuver because they don't have more room. And we're not even speaking about Mobiks being super fucking fighters. Moby Kings, back then, they were making fucking shitty videos about how they were beating each other in the filtration and training camps. And they were complaining about, we have this video with one guy saying, I have a airsoft or paintball vest. Turns out it's not an airsoft or paintball vest, it's an Iranian ballistic vest. And that, funny enough, Russians themselves tested it and they found it pretty good for quote-unquote Iran. I found that a bit preposterous from the Russian guys, but you know, it is what it is. Then we had images of the first problems in Kharkov. We started to see BTR 4s burned by the whole unit. We started to see tanks not moving forward. Then Bahmut is going for the worst because suddenly the Wagner troops do a 10-kilometer advance within 2 weeks. So all this situation that we're seeing here by Trofimov claiming that with 19 howitzers and more ammunition, he could have liberated Zaporozhye. That's simply not true, because with the start of Operation Bahmut, whatever troops Ukrainians have at that point is sent straight up to stop the advance of Dickhead and his friends around Bahmut towards Popasna. And they completely understand what the problem is, because it's a very important highway which connects toward Konstantinovka. And once you lose Konstantinovka, I posted the thread from our French pro-NATO guy, who shows more or less the lines that were created in order to defend the last cluster of cities in North Donetsk Oblast. So the Ukrainians are properly alarmed, because suddenly we're like slapping them around in Kharkov and Kherson, but these bitches counterattacking Donetsk. What the fuck's wrong? And I said to you guys, the loss in Kharkov wasn't desired, but they already had a foothold via Lysychansk and Severodonetsk. So for the Russians, Kharkov is a big bloody nose, but it's not important anymore, because you're not trying to do this whole cauldron shit that you tried for 6 months didn't work because you didn't have enough troops, and basically you were guarding your ears with retards. the same kind of guys that Ukrainians threw for 2 or 3 months in Luganda, terror bobs that they were captured. You were guys literally fucking praying to Pan Zelensky to help them out of the inferno that was the conquest of Lugansk Oblast. This situation is completely denied by Trofimov. Trofimov is like, yeah, if Zaluzny had these weapons, it would be fine. It isn't. First of all, they didn't have the troops. There is one reason why Kharkov lasted so long, because when the first wave was extremely successful and the Russians pulled back to more advantageous positions to mock our friend Konashenko, the reality is that there were actual more advantageous positions and it was hell to pay to go through them. And Ukrainians did that and had losses. But at the same time, in order to have all this advance on all these fronts, so you have Kharkov, you have Kherson, you will have Zaporozhye, then you have southern and central Donetsk, Donbass. Your front at that point is still over 1,700 kilometers instead of the 900 and even less now, because now you have only flashpoints. Ukrainians just didn't have the manpower. It has nothing to do with the West not giving weapons. We know the numbers. Until the fucking month of April, end of April, 1st of May, 63,000 people were trained by the West, and probably less than 120,000 were quote unquote trained by Ukrainians themselves. And if we had to follow up on what people like Arakamian were saying back then in Donbass, he was saying between 500,000 people are lost every day, wounded, killed, captured. That was high intensity shit, Bahmut. Of course, it's bullshit because it's the whole front, but it's the whole front because it's a wider front. It's twice the size of what they have right now on paper, and probably a lot bigger because we have very limited flashpoints now. So this situation is problematic. On one side, you have Russian reinforcements coming on. On the other side, you have Russian troops gotten back from Kherson. They go to R&R, but they also are ready to defend any kind of landing. They also get out, spread out to Zaporozhye. Zaporozhye has also a big issue because it's flat. That's what we saw in this counteroffensive right now. It's fucking flat. So anything that flies and that can hit you over 10 kilometers is going to fuck you up and hold. That's what happened in this summer. On top of FPVs, on top of Lancets, but the Kamovs literally had a barbecue party non-stop. And this is where we're going with the situation where Trofimov is trying to shape the narrative, trying to say that the West failed Ukraine. Reality is not that. Ukraine failed Ukraine. Ukraine went for the easy money, the easy goals, easy, once again, quote unquote, because it wasn't, but things that they at the end would still have because of how the situation was. On one side, you had the topographic problem for the Russians, which was how the fuck do we get out of Kherson if it gets too hot in here? Therefore, mentally, the logic was to pull out, and that's what I said. Either you fight for Kherson City and you lose Kherson Oblast towards, as I said, exchange of POWs, all kinds of bullshit that Ukrainians would have loved to do if they had a large contingent of Russian POWs. Especially, don't forget that 5.5 months before, those scenes were with Ukrainians when over 2,500 Ukrainian Poles were captured in Mariupol. So this is one of the things that the Russians also didn't want to have. And at the end, Darat Harb Surovikin was right to decide the moment when to fucking leave it up. It was humiliating, I'm pretty sure, for a lot of people, but they had a plan. They knew what they were going to do. And Bahmut, with all the savagery, all the losses, all the blood spilled, all the out of the box thinking. I mean, what the fuck? 20, 30,000 prisoners recruited. Sorry to say it like this, free manpower, while the Ukrainians were already grabbing people on the street. So all these things, one side you have Russian mobilization, on the other side you have a Russian counterattack or a Russian operation Bahmut. On the other side, Ukrainians still haven't finished clearing up Kharkov the way they wanted. They are having more and more troubles. End of December, it's already clear that it's not going the way they wanted to go, compared especially the first 2 weeks. And by January, it's slow reversal that happens. On the other side, Kherson is locked. So the only way that you're going to have is going to be, yes, Zaporozhye. But Zaporozhye, you tried once, you tried twice, it doesn't work. And it's not because of tanks, it's not because of APCs, it's not because of HIMARS, because you already have HIMARS and you can fire HIMARS like a mother because your stocks are still fresh. You are not forced to get 500 and 800 HIMARS per 4 months because you're firing them like a retard like in 2023. So the main situation here is that you have a limited arsenal. You are requiring things that still have a very limited reach, except for the HIMARS. And in my opinion, there were never requests for jets at that moment because jets would have taken way too long. And don't forget that the first program for training is from July 2022. The first approval for a pilot training program in the US from Ukraine is July 2022, and nothing happens. And not as much because the Russians are rocking or the Ukrainians are stupid, but simply because at that point, nobody has the F-16s to spare. This, of course, is half a lie, but I'm going to explain myself later. But most importantly, nobody is willing to see the F-16s go down in flames because at that moment, Ukrainian pilots cannot fly properly. They are forced to fly over 130 kilometers and lob harms to air defenses, and they get called by R-37Ms from 200 kilometers. 215 or 16 was the proven record by R-37. So we have this situation where whatever Trofimov pretends to say, whatever Zaluzhny pretends today, what he was asking, or he is asking, and we will take the word of the head of procurement of the Ukrainian army, date of June 2022, they are looking at 48 to 60,000 troops equipped with, I think, 600 tanks, 1,300 APCs, and I think 1,000 artillery tubes, plus the equipment, plus logistics and so on. So we are looking roughly at 48,000, 60,000 people maximum. But the West trained those people in 20 months. No, I'm exaggerating, it's about 30 to 40 months, but you know what I mean. Like, the capacity of the West to train these people outside Ukraine is very, very small. And by November, the training effort only started in October, with the first 2,000 that were in France, about 1,300 that went in the UK, and the program was being still taken care of in Germany, except for specialty roles like HIMARS, like anti-aircraft, and artillery. So overall, it's not that the Allies didn't want to give. There was no manpower ready to do that. And we know that by December, there are over 300,000 people that were already called, that were mobilized, and we know that because one idiot got fucking killed and had still his paper on pocket, and we saw that was Zhitomir, and his number of call-up was 300,000 something. So once again, our biggest trouble here is that all this shit is pure narrative. It's narrative shaping just in order to have something to say about the counter. First, it was not enough tanks. Then it was not on time. Then it was not enough training. Oh, this ping pong of responsibilities is absolutely demented, and shows that whoever is guiding the effort on this war on both sides, Ukraine and NATO, US, whoever you want, these guys are not sure what to do with it. I think their main goal, let's be honest, was still achieved. The war is a mild stalemate. So, in a sense, Ukraine now can have its own agency to fuck up any kind of negotiations by saying, I'm still alive, I defended myself. But the reality is that they cannot defend themselves without foreign input. Literally, the joke was who puts the gas in the tank? Ain't Zelensky or Zalupitchka. No, it's the US and the EU. Therefore, you have all these voices about funding, about aid packages, and so on and so on. So, when we add all this information and when we see openly, there are a lot of mistakes done by the Russians, for sure. And it took a long time to correct some of them. Some others are still not corrected. Some other are capability problems which the Russians cannot solve in the middle of a war without external input. But so far, that external input has been extremely positive. Let's be honest. The Chinese have been great, especially with oil purchase and also turning a blind eye for both component sales, whole products with drones and shit like that. But most importantly, with machine tools. And we saw that the Russians, first of all, were completely switching to Chinese sourced machine tools, not Chinese made only. Some Chinese sourced machine tools are actually European because they need them, spare parts and shit like that. But most importantly, China keeps doing business. The Chinese are getting through. Chinese car industries benefiting enormously of the Russian market. This is something I said straight off the bat. The swap is going to hit the Europeans. They don't understand the problem. The problem is that the Sinization of Russia, the swap of Russia from the European continent to Asia, literally kills the European continent strategically on long term. Probably is going to cause problems to the Russians as well. But a revanchist Russia, if this war ends with a Pyrrhic victory or a draw, if you are an Ukrainian, you don't want that. If you are an Ukrainian, you either want a complete, utter victory, but that would require NATO intervention, or you want a small defeat for yourself, when you can still keep some attributes of the state and lose some shit that at the end were still too much for the Ukrainian state. I'm not speaking about Crimea because that's a pearl, but I'm speaking about all the fucking Donetsk and Lugansk Oblast. Those parts were just milked. There was nothing given there. They were milked because there were key industries. You had key ports, Mariupol, Berdyansk, and so on. But all the rest, it doesn't matter. Ukraine actually is suffering more by the fact that now there is a physical border between Belgorod and Kharkov, but they don't give a fuck about losing Mariupol per se. It's still the heartland of Donetsk. Losing Avdiivka, that city is still a nightmare. It was all the city was living thanks to the coke plant that was barely functional. It's the same thing for a lot of industries in Donbass. They are past their prime. They are useful, yes. They bring money, yes, because Ukraine didn't have to invest in it. It was done by the Soviet Union. But most of that shit would get slapped by emission penalties in the global market. So, to wrap up the situation, Trofimov knows very well what he's doing. He's shaping narrative. He's also ignoring, of course, every single fact that would go against the narrative. And as I said, it's very simple. Multiple failed operations in Zaporozhye, ongoing operation in Kherson and in Kharkov. By the end of the first Kharkov phase, which is basically roughly around the 20th of September 2022, the start of the Wagner operation from Popasna towards Bakhmut throws a spanner in the whole propaganda victory, because at the end of the day, the biggest loss, the biggest problem for Ukraine is literally losing Bakhmut and having that thorn now under Konstantinovka. And this is where actually we need to be very attentive for whatever we're reading. And once again, it has nothing to do. You don't need to see that on a Russian lens. On Russian lens, quite the contrary. I think in this space I was critical enough. A lot of stuff that the Russians didn't do or did horribly wrong. But all these articles right now are on pure cope. It's narrative shifting, and it's extremely damaging to. Okay, Trofimov has no reputation; he's a fucking whore. But it's extremely damaging to people who want to tomorrow, especially people in international relationships, military academies, are going to use sources because the narrative on this war is completely fucked up. uh, we are into absolute cataclysmic mythology. We have Zaluzhny that with 90 fucking howitzers is going to turn the tide. We had free the leopards in January. The leopards were freed, and it turned out that the Wonder Bussy didn't like ice creams. Then it was the Challenger that would fucking push away the Cop Toblerone. It never saw one. Then it was the claim that Bakhmut was the biggest strategic mistake on the Russian part, and it caused the mutiny of Wagner, and basically Russia was fucked. We are now the 11th of January. It would have been. Who's on the offense? Who lost the initiative? Who has the initiative? Who is crying for ammunition, for equipment? Who is crying for drones? And I'm not saying that's the absolute truth. Of course they're gonna fucking play this out. Of course they're gonna play the dai zbroyo, dai оружие. That's normal. That whole nation is like that. The problem is not there. The problem is somewhere else. Problem is that these narratives, in my opinion, I'm going to repeat it, are extremely damaging, not that much to us who more or less follow this war with fervor, or at least keep tabs on that. They are going to be damaging for policies, for discourse, for narratives after this war. And if you want, I'm going to make a digression. If you want a way to see how narratives get completely twisted, I would like to present you with how the narratives around the Bayraktar and Pansir were explained by Patti Marins very recently. I literally needed to pull out sources to show that it's complete bollocks. And she still said, oh, short. No. This is the biggest issue that we're going to have after this war is done. First of all, the West is never going to recognize they fucked up Ukraine. Second of all, Ukrainians are not going to recognize they fucked up in March. They should have taken the deal in March. Not because they're going to lose, but because whatever happens after this year and next year, Ukraine is going to be in a worse state. And that's the attrition we're talking about. We had this article about the Dnipro surgeon that said, I have done 3,000 amputations. I said on the analysis that these are amputations. These are not cauterizations. These are not cleanup of shattering wounds. These are not loss of limbs. No, these, as I said, are amputations. So basically, there is still some limb there. It's not salvageable. Part of it is because it has been broken and started to necrose. On the other side is that it has been broken, but it's still going over there, and it has been basically messed up. The garrote is not good enough. The golden hour hasn't been respected. The guy has had hypothermia at whatever other condition. So his arm, his leg, his foot, whatever, cannot be saved, and we cut it off. And there was also the saying that the last couple of weeks there were between 50 and 100 surgeries. That means 1,500 seriously wounded, which means I did the calculus. If it's only 1 month or 4 weeks, we're at minimum 1,400, maximum 2,800. Could be more if you want to take the 30 days. But overall, what this shows is that there is no relenting in this war, and the Ukrainian losses are real. Despite the fact that Ukraine does its best to show every single damage they inflict to the Russians. And they show it right away in order to present that we are winning. We are putting much more heat on the Russians. But as we already discussed, now we have at least one form of template in which we can compare between Media Zona and Ukrainian proven losses, and we are even. I know we are not. I know that there are a lot of things that are proven to be beyond that, but at least on that compendium, so Iwa Losses on Twitter, follow him, guys. It's not me, first of all. I'm not going to say it's me. It has never been me, but follow the guy because he's doing a service, a public service to whoever is going to make a policy tomorrow for Ukraine. Because, and I'm going to use Snake's words for this, Zelensky is not fit for office anymore. He has shown very nasty tendencies, and of course it's war, so that's the first thing that happens. But he has shown very nasty tendencies, very populistic tendencies, and very petty tendencies, especially if you think that his chief of staff is an absolute moron. Now I'm sure that Zaluzhny is an absolute complete moron for a lot of things that have been said, done, and now claimed. It doesn't matter if it's not the truth, but if you go on record with a known newspaper, American newspaper, and you say, with that much I could have won, you are an absolute moron and you are the lowest of the low. Especially between October and December 2022. But that's another plan. So, guys, this was more or less my rant. I have 3 more points to add, but if you want, I can address them into the Q&A. First of all, we are seeing stuff coming up. I had made this list in October, I think, or September. I'm not sure. I'm going to check with a couple of drone projects that were coming online. Some of them are already there. Some others are belated, especially the swastika lancet, so the swarm lancet, the Shahid with a pulse jet, turbojet, that one was talked about, but I was expecting Grom, not the Grom that you think, but another drone Grom. Apparently, the Russians chose once again for a foreign product because, in my opinion, I think it was better achieved and also it has better mass, better payload. And the most important thing is that we saw now the whole unholy trinity of UMPKs. We saw the 250, the 500, and the 1500. On top of it, we saw also the RBK. So that is going to be adding a lot more spice to the Russian capabilities in the upcoming months and upcoming year. And then the most important part, there is one thing that, as you can see, Russians are not lagging behind FPV, both production, use, and innovation. Our friend Sergei Flash, so it's a technical advisor for the Ukrainian armed forces. First thing that he said, "Oh, guys, it's very problematic. I don't have good news. First of all, it was a Shahid with a reaction, and it flew 500 kilometers within Ukraine. And the second part is, of course, he saw footage of a AI targeting FPV, which makes it technically or theoretically impossible to jam if the FPV can be self-guiding and self-targeting." And then the last point, I started to have a little bit of a trouble with a couple of mappers. I am, for reasons that I cannot explain to myself, I'm going literally either to Creamy Caprice on TG, either on Ukrainian mappers, because they have less incentive to lie about Russian advances. But also, I can compare Creamy because Creamy uses only proven locations. I am finding myself really in trouble with Syriac because I would like to be 100% supportive of him. He's a great guy. He does a great job. No issues with that. But last couple of maps that is actually presented make no sense to me because there was never any kind of Russian geolocation where he put the Russians and where he's talking about being pulled back. Both sides in Avdiivka are like this. The pushback on Severne, don't know how it happened. We have no geolocation for Ukrainians being there. And the pushback up in Novokalinove, just the same. The mortar and artillery hit on the Ukrainian advanced position is well in the gray zone. It was never a Russian-controlled area. I'll make a small addendum to that because I think right now both sides are heavily fluctuating. I'm using Ukrainian sources, especially for Avdiivka, because I don't want. This is what Teamwork Criminal is about. We rather prefer having the worst news and be surprised positively than believe the best news. This is what happened with Avdiivka. A lot of people were super happy, and I've since the beginning had what I thought was the real outline of the advance the first couple of days. Turned out I was right. Once again, guys, do not be over optimistic, but do not be over pessimistic. We saw what happened with Bakhmut. Bakhmut was stalling from November to January, and then suddenly Soledar, and then it was downhill from there. At the end, motherfucker, dickhead with his buddies played hardball and started to hoard supplies and do minimal advances in order to pressure the Russian Ministry of Defense to keep him in the game. And unfortunately, what happened. It's passé now. Ite misa est. We're not going to talk about it. So now, guys, I'm giving you the floor. Please, if you want to intervene, it would be great. I'm gonna say, guys, I have some new guy, Archie. I don't know who it is. I have very few data on this on the guy. So I'm not sure I'm going to give you the word right away in order to avoid funny issues. Archie, I'm going to leave you for the as last. Guys, please make your demands. Well, that solved itself. So nobody is willing to take the floor. No problem, guys. It's I can also cut it like this. Okay, then I'm gonna just add three more things. I don't know if you guys saw the thread regarding the defensive lines on Donbass, but I you can literally see why I thought about Berezivka and the cut through the defensive seam, because going on Cheretine, you're gonna hit yourself towards Pokrovsk, and going extremely north straight up, you are gonna get tangled into the sister cities fortifications. So the logic, as I said, is to do a wild bet, which is cut through the seam between Ocheretine and Keramik no Kalinove and Novomutivka. Then march as fast as possible towards Berezivka, cut the second flow of supplies towards Konstantinovka from the southwest, reduce Pokrovsk to almost nothing, useless basically for the defense of the sister cities, unless they took a huge detour. And then you can control basically one of the four cities, and then you can start pressuring from Slovyansk, which, as you saw on the map, is an absolute beast, and it's going to, well, cause a lot of trouble this year once Avdivka is done. Apparently, guys, nobody wants to intervene. Very surprising, but it's not a problem. Then thank you very much for having me on this space. I'm very glad to have had you with us. Once again, Happy New Year, guys. And we will have the huge mega space probably on Saturday regarding the follow up. And I owe one space to Snake, because I wanted to have his opinion about what he thinks is going to come from the American side post March, because I think that most of the heavy support financially and militarily is going to probably come around end of February and March. Right now in January, it's not that there is not going to be help or whatever, but for some reason they are playing ball. In my opinion, now I see clearly that it is to pressure whoever on the G7 to have a go at the Russian assets. This, as I said, is going to be a lot more complicated in Europe than in the US, but apparently in the US, despite what was thought to be about $60 billion worth of assets, only 4 to 5 billion are said to be reachable by the United States government. So yeah, we will see. It would be very problematic legally, but in this war, the West has shown its true colors, so I'm not expecting much. Plus, as I've said since the beginning, the only thing that this is going to create is having the Russians destroy a lot more of Ukraine in order to make the reconstruction more problematic, and also provoke that money, instead of being spent for reconstruction, so it's productive and useful, is going to be spent for weapons, which are going to be fired, probably anti-aircraft missiles and stuff like that. That means nothing productive, used, lost, and ultimately the perfect use for stolen funds. Basically, just blow that money in the air. So guys, accept that space as well, probably somewhere between today and next Tuesday. I'm gonna talk with Snake with that if he has any better insights than me. He probably has. So thank you very much once again. Have a nice day, and we'll see each other around. Okay, bye.